everyone. It is an absolute delight to introduce our next speaker. Over more than 30 years in diplomacy and development, he has worked across Asia, Africa, Middle East, Europe, led British development offices in some of the world's most demanding posts, advised the UK at the World Bank, and played a key role in creating the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. He's also a Cambridge man, architecture and English at King's College. Today, he serves as Britain's Deputy High Commissioner to India. Please join me in welcoming Ben Mellor.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Crabtree. I'll be your chairman for the next short period. It's excellent to be here with the Deputy High Commissioner, although only recently arrived in Delhi for his second spell, actually a long-term India observer, having run the India desk at the Foreign Office for the preceding 4 or 5 years. So someone who's been able to hit the ground running. The way we're going to do this, the Deputy High Commissioner has agreed that he'll deliver his prepared remarks in brief from the chair, and then we'll have a bit more time for discussion and open it up to the audience. So Deputy High Commissioner, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, James. As was said in my introduction, I've been in some of the most dangerous countries in the world, but the most dangerous place for diplomats today is in front of students with cell phones. So hence my requirement to stay a little bit on script, but let's see where we go in the conversation afterwards. High Commissioner, colleagues, friends, it is a real pleasure to be back in Cambridge and to be in the Union for this dialogue today, and to be here with students, with academics, with business leaders, with policy shapers. Cambridge, as you've heard, matters to me personally. I was a student here in the early 90s, and it's always educational to return to a place where you've got fond memories and to see the change that has happened over time. Some things are very familiar, perhaps, as the High Commissioner said, perhaps nostalgic in one's feelings. Sometimes you also notice how things have changed. You notice what is different. And to me, that change, the opportunity, is, of course, the thing that is exciting. And that is perhaps a theme that you'll notice rather clumsily that I'll be working on in these remarks. Shortly after I graduated, I went off as a young diplomat to work in India on what we then called slum improvement projects, and now I think we call urban services. Today, I'm back in Delhi as the Deputy British High Commissioner. When I find myself back in Delhi 6 months ago, I was nostalgic for the Delhi that I remembered from 30 years before, but I was excited about the opportunities for the job that I had ahead of me. And that is what I'm going to just talk about a little bit here. The UK-India partnership that exists today is, I would suggest, the strongest it's ever been, and in many ways stronger, and in many ways going to get stronger as we look ahead. This feels exactly the right time to be having the kind of conversation that we're having today. India, as the High Commissioner said it out, roughly a $4 trillion economy, already one of the world's largest, growing 6 to 8% every year, fastest in the G20. Demographic scale remains extraordinary, 1/6 of the planet, and 25 million 18-year-olds entering the jobs market each year. Public capital expenditure running at just over 3% of GDP. But behind those headline numbers is something even more significant, a shift from incremental growth to long-term capability building across data, across semiconductors, clean energy. The High Commissioner gave you the list. And of course, I speak for the UK government. We're still the 4th largest economy in the world. We are a $4 trillion economy, just ahead, for now, of India. We would, frankly, be very grateful for growth figures anywhere near 6%. I think anywhere near 1%, the Chancellor would be pleased with. But we also have world-leading financial and professional services, world-class research, a regulatory and legal environment that gives business confidence to scale internationally. And Indian firms recognise these strengths, and India indeed has been the 2nd largest investor in the UK for 6 consecutive years. The UK-India investment relationship, UK investments in India, Indian investments in the UK, creates around 600,000 jobs across our two countries. And as the High Commissioner said, That's the kind of growth, that's the kind of economy we need to see, an economy that creates jobs, that creates value, that creates wealth for both our countries. I was going to talk about the free trade agreement. It is, I think, one of the biggest achievements of the UK-India partnership of this generation. But the High Commissioner summarised it much better than my speaking notes. So I'm going to skip that, other than to say that the sooner we bring it into force, the sooner we will be able to get on with actually delivering the impact that we want to see, which is more trade, which is actually making sure that those businesses will be able to trade freely and all the other benefits. And of course, it's more than just about trade. The High Commissioner did point out that the FTA itself is about more than trade. I would also say it's a political statement of a commitment from our two governments to our businesses, to our people, to say we are two countries that will work closely together. We talk a lot about how we need to build a high trust environment. We heard about this in the panel session just now. High trust environments are what is really important in this global age that we face. And a signal like the signing of a free trade agreement, like the signing of Vision 2035, where our two prime ministers set out their plans for the next decade, these are about the practical implications that they deliver, but they're also about building that trust, building those connections between our two countries. And then I just want to say a little bit about education and about because we're in Cambridge, just to pull it together. Education, people, is the golden thread that does run across that. And it is particularly fitting to have this conversation here in Cambridge, because Cambridge in many ways is at the forefront of that relationship. You heard in the opening remarks today about the visit by the Vice-Chancellor to Delhi and Mumbai earlier this year, the real opportunity to build strong relationships between our two countries. We may return to the issue of the fact that UK universities are now opening campuses in India, but this is not simply about degree farms. This is actually about the collaboration around research, collaboration around top-end trust-building relationships that work. We know from all the evidence, if you study in a UK university, you come from India, you're more likely to invest in the UK afterwards. You also go away with that strong sense of community with the alumni that you've made and the friends that you've made here. If you're at the Judge School, that's all what it's about. It's about going out there, building that relationship afterwards. That's good for you, that's good for the country that you come from, that's good for the country that we are in at the moment, and that's the kind of benefits that we want to look at. I'm going to skip through all the rest of it. It's all very good. The AI, we're going to have, I hope Kanishka Narayan's going to be here this afternoon, and he does the AI pitch way, way better than I can. But just to be really clear, there are two superpowers, US and China, but there is a very clear third place. That is the UK. We are the third AI superpower. We have the third largest AI market. You know this in Cambridge. Just make sure you say it all to Kanishka really clearly. We're excited about the prospects in AI. We're going to make that market even bigger, and we're going to use Indian expertise to help us turbocharge that. Kanishka will do this at much greater length this afternoon. Okay, and then just to wrap it all up, so we are basically in this very strong new phase of the UK-India relationship. We may be nostalgic for the relationship that we have, and we shouldn't forget the relationship we've had. We've had a long relationship. We heard about the President of the Union in 1930, whatever it was. You know, that is something that we draw on. It's a strength. The people are a strength of our relationship. We acknowledge our history without being tied down by our history. But building on that into the future, the best is yet to come. I look back on that 30 years since I first went to India and what I saw then to what I see now, and I think about what the next 30 years might hold. And the ceiling is, there's no ceiling to the ambition that we should have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Deputy High Commissioner. So we started a little bit late, so I'm going to just take the full allotted amount of time that we had. I have some questions, and I'll open it up. So let's start with the free trade agreement. There's been a sort of hint of this. When is it going to come into force? As in, is there a snag and a hold-up? And then what can be done on both sides to make sure that the maximum amount of benefit is gained from having this new agreement? Because as you both said at the dinner last night, there is a next phase that is needed to actually get people to use the agreement to reap the benefit.
So 5 years ago, when I started working on the India desk and we started the negotiations for the free trade agreement, everybody thought we would really struggle, UK and India, to get a free trade agreement done. The UK didn't have a lot of experience in negotiating free trade agreements, and cover your ears, High Commissioner, India had a slight reputation for signing free trade agreements and then not implementing free trade agreements. So this would be a marriage made in hell in terms of bringing those two things together. What we've proved over the last 4 years is that actually there is a really good knit between our two economies, and that free trade agreement is about creating the framework to really allow that kind of trade to go. What I've also learned in that last 4 years is that when you sign a free trade agreement, it turns out that it's quite a lot more work that's needed before entry into force. So we had to go through legal ratification. That was all knocked on the head. It went through Parliament over the last 6 months ago. And then there's the really boring nuts and bolts bit of making sure that on day one, when a British widget manufacturer from the West Midlands starts to sign the right sort of forms to export their widgets to indoor, that the machinery all works. That is also pretty much there. And then there are a couple of issues that are just being resolved. And I am very confident, and the Government of India, I think I can speak for both our governments, we're very confident that we are very close to being able to say all of that preparatory work is done, and then we'll be in a position to have entry into force as soon as possible. Both sides, from a government perspective, are really keen to get entry into force as soon as possible.
So we're talking weeks, months?
A former Prime Minister once said we'll get the deal done by Diwali, if you remember, and ever since then I've been incredibly nervous about putting timelines on anything. But I don't think it will take that long for us to get the last bits of the deal finalised and to get that into effect. Because, your second part of the question, the real prize is not entry into force, it's what happens then. And it's about making sure that Indian and British businesses are ready to maximise the benefits from it. We'll have a series of roadshows around the UK, there'll be roadshows around India. India is actually ahead of us in a lot of states have done their own analysis of where the benefits will be. And I think that's really good. And if you are here from the Indian side, check out what your state has done. I was in Lucknow 3 or 4 weeks ago. UP has done some really interesting work on what the benefits will be of the trade deal. We're trying to do something a bit similar for like what the benefits are in Scotland, what the benefits are for the North, etc., to try and make sure we have that same benefit. But that will be how we exploit the benefit.
Let me ask a little bit about education. So in a sense, one of the premises of the deal is that there's a lot of potential growth in services, and there's also a component which is about people movement. I mean, it's been no secret that one of the long-running sort of niggles in the UK-India relationship has been around visas. So you have on the one hand a free trade agreement, and then on the other hand you have a UK government that in various ways after the 2025 migration white paper is actually tightening some of the visa rules. So just sort of talk to us about this and offer reassurances that for those of our Indian friends for whom people movement and services liberalization is a kind of core aim of this, that in a sense we're doing our part.
Yep. So one bit, I mean, it was very interesting how many times during the FTA negotiation I was told that the reason why we hadn't got it done was because of a problem with migration. And however many times I told people that free trade agreements don't say anything about migration other than for strictly business, to ease business, which it does do. Nobody ever believed that. But I will say again, there is a separate track of conversations around migration, and it's separate from the free trade agreement, always has been, and rightly should be. On the migration, I think we have had a very good story in terms of the UK-India migration story. There are more students from India than any other country. There are more skilled work visas from India than any other country. There are more tourist visas, not more tourist visas. There's a record number of Indian tourists now coming to the UK. We process a huge number of visas for people from India to come to the UK. And we also reintroduced a couple of years ago e-visas, which had been suspended since COVID, and that was brought in to ease transport from the UK to India. That's legal migration, getting the right people over with the right skills, like some of the people I see in this room, like some of the people you talk to and you know about. Legal migration is fantastic, it adds growth, it builds this country, it makes this country what it is. Illegal migration is something that both the Government of India and the Government of UK do not believe in, do not support, will stand down on. The victims of illegal migration are not governments, they are the people who are trafficked. It is absolutely appalling. And the number of illegal migrants from India, because it is 1/6 of the world, is a very high number in the UK. And it's not in a per capita sense a very high number, but it is an absolute sense. And every single one of those people is a victim of trafficking, has come illegally to this country. And we work very closely with the Indian government to return people who've come illegally, to tackle it at source, to make sure that there's less visa fraud, to tackle serious organized crime that is behind that. Those two stories are not contradictory. More of the right people, less of the wrong people, and that's something that's in both our countries' interests.
Let me pick up a theme that came up in the previous panel that Dr. Lal mentioned about defense cooperation between the UK and India. So, I mean, I asked a question in the previous session about defense tech, which I think is a particularly, an area of sort of particular interest, but even from a raw trade perspective, I mean, I think there's quite a lot of ambition here, but if I have it right, not very much of India's defense spend goes on UK exports. For instance, I think in India, it is often said that France is the new Russia, which is a Brits obviously very galling. So what are you doing to displace our French friends in the affections of India in the defense sector?
I would never wish to go down that route. The most important change in direction in terms of the Indian defense sector is the Made in India approach. And that is something that the UK is fully supportive of India's ambitions to move away from dependency on anybody. What I think we've seen is that India's over-dependence on first Soviet and then Russian military hardware has actually, in the long run, not been to India's benefit. And I think as we see, and at the moment, this is where it perhaps gets a little more controversial, but not from a UK perspective, but Russia is an increasingly unreliable partner. And so therefore, if you're highly dependent on an unreliable partner, you want to try and move away from that. Prime Minister Modi recognised this a decade ago and started a process of moving away. One of the things the UK is very good at, so you talk about that percentage in terms of absolute kit. We don't, you're right, sell as much absolute kit as some other countries, but we do and are in the interest of working on co-development, on technology transfer, on working very closely with the Indian defence sector to make sure that is world-class in its, and we do believe, and we do have absolutely a world-class defence sector in the UK, which I'm very proud of, and we should make sure that is pushing in. Do I want to win a few more contracts? You know, I will happily have a conversation about the Rafales, but we don't have the alternative to that right now. But that's why, absolutely, in money terms, you can see the number. It's the year the Rafales came in that caused the uptick in the French piece. Overall, India is going to be one of the biggest defence spenders on the planet over the next couple of decades. And the UK will want a piece of that pie as a trading nation. And lots of other countries will also want a piece of that pie, and I suspect that we'll be in that position.
Let me ask 2 or 3 questions about broader geopolitical issues before I open it up to the audience. So one which we were talking about is critical minerals. So in general, almost all countries in the world are attempting to de-risk in one form or another, and in a sense lurking behind this UK-India conversation are the 2 superpowers, both of whom, in a sense, to both sides are increasingly problematic actors in some respects. On the American side, both the UK and India now have a more complex relationship with the US. On the Chinese side, a potentially predatory relationship. So on the issue of critical minerals, which was much in the news last year during the kind of US-China back and forth, is that an area where you can see the UK and India working together to reduce dependencies?
Absolutely, and it is one of the critical minerals is one of the areas that we identified in the Technology and Security Initiative, TSI, and indeed it's a partnership that is being driven from the University of Cambridge in terms of our partnership with University of Dhanbad, IIT Dhanbad, and IIT Bombay, I think, I might get that wrong, which is about working together on an observatory, which is about mapping where current critical minerals are, where the supply chain, how we improve the management of that. Because one of the things that we found, you're right, is that some countries have sought to basically seize control of the critical mineral supply chain, and that is not in the interest of other countries. So by coming together, countries like India and the UK, which have a very common interest in this space, can actually do some really useful work. So that's one of the reasons why we identified it as a key area. We also have some expertise around mining and extracting, which is also quite useful, though I suspect that in terms of the big, there's an issue about, it's a bit, we get a lot of lithium out of Cornwall. but it's still fairly niche in terms of the global market. So it's more about making sure we understand the global supply chain and how we can make sure that is secure, not captured by any individual countries.
Now, my role here as chair is, particularly with an honoured guest, is to ask polite and not too difficult questions. But let me ask two slightly more pointed questions to close. One of which, so at the recent Raisina dialogue, the Deputy Secretary of the United States, Deputy Secretary of State Landau, made some reasonably pointed remarks about India's long-term trajectory, as in presently, viewed from the United States, India has been a very close partner, arguably the closest partner, but his point of view was that basically from the American point of view, they didn't feel that they wanted to make the same mistake they'd made with China twice, and therefore the approach to India was going to be a bit more guarded, as in it wasn't going to be full friendship. I wondered if you could comment on that from a sort of UK-Europe perspective, and how, in a sense, I presume you see the world slightly differently from our American friends, but how would you chart this long-term trajectory of India's rise, to be a true global superpower by roughly mid-century?
I mean, from a UK perspective, what will always drive our perspective on any global issue is UK self-interest, in the same way that what drives US interests, US positions is US self-interest. In India's case, India's self-interest. And in UK's situation, when it comes to a question like that, we are a trading nation. We cannot escape our geography. As we heard earlier, our geography is a maritime geography and a geography of free trade and flow of capital. We're the largest. We own more of the rest of the world, and the rest of the world owns more of us. Whether we like that or not, it's simply the reality. And therefore, our interests are driven by countries trading with each other freely and the global economy growing. Therefore, there is no threat to the UK from India growing at 6-7%, even if it gets up to the 10-11% that the government of India has ambitions for. That is not something that we would see as a threat. We also, our key trading relationships are with the US and with Europe. That is still going to be our key focus. And again, it'll be the same. What is the best interest of the UK when we go into those discussions? How do we make sure those are protected? We have a high trust relationship with the US. We did have a high trust relationship with the EU, which we're resetting to get that back. It will all be about building trust in order to make sure that we're able to trade freely, in order to make sure that we're building back growth, building back jobs, building back prosperity. Same. There's no mistakes that could be made there. And to be fair, Deputy Secretary Landau did row back a little bit from those comments after Russia.
Let me ask one other question. So I've been doing a lot of work this year on India, Europe, as well as India, UK, both, as you say, I mean, no question that these are relationships now that have much more energy than any of us could have thought of. But I was talking to somebody recently and their skeptical view on this was, yes, there's a lot we can do with India bilaterally, but in a narrow Western sense, so not for those of you in the room who are Indian, but we Westerners, we've got a big problem, which is that the world order that we rather liked is collapsing, and therefore we need friends with whom we can work to prop up or rebuild in different ways elements of that order. Now, often, we look to Japan, to South Korea, to Australia. I guess when you look at the relationship with India, what are the things that you look at which aren't simply about what we can do together bilaterally, trade and investment, services, but in terms of the rebuilding and the sustenance of this world order? What are we trying to do together with India to keep the world from fracturing and falling apart?
I think it is the Indian approach we can learn quite a lot from, which I think is really interesting in terms of that managing in a multipolar world, which is what we are in. We were getting the history earlier of how India got to where it is in terms of moving from sort of non-alignment to sort of multipolar in terms of the thinking. I think from a UK perspective, I think that we actually, we will always benefit from a multipolar world. We always used to, even when we were in the European Union, we used to talk about ourselves as being the bridge between the US and the EU, therefore always defining ourselves as being something a little bit different. Certainly when after Brexit, when we started trying to think about how we redefine our relationships with countries like India, it was very much about saying we have opportunities here, not risks and threats. It wasn't meant to be a defensive position, but rather an open position, and saying what are those alliances, or the small alliances, now we call them agile alliances in the UK Foreign Office, I don't really like the word, but I'm going to use it because somebody here is going to be recording me. And if you can report that back that I did say the words agile alliances in my speech, that would be really good. But by that, what we mean is not the kind of alliances that we were stuck in the past, where you were, one all for one and one for all, but those agile alliances where it's an alliance or a partnership around a particular issue, around a particular theme. We've seen it in Ukraine, where those countries that care deeply for the UN Charter, care deeply for the sovereignty of Ukraine, care deeply for the European border, came together to support Ukraine. We see it around other sort of, like you mentioned about critical minerals, we see countries coming together. The Quad is a really interesting example where they're kind of coming together on a series of issues. So this agile alliances language, or whatever we call it, is going to be, I think, increasingly the way that we work. And I think the UK is very well placed to do it, and I think India is very well placed to do it.
Right, and we're going to take some questions, but I just want to ask one very quick final question, which is we're in an audience at the Judge Business School, so lots of people thinking about, investing and future growth. If you were to pick a lesser-known area of the UK-India bilateral that you're really excited about, so not the obvious things, but something that you think is really, keep your eye on, whatever it might be, quantum, biotech, pick an area. What should we be excited about that we're not thinking about?
I think the risk is that we are incredibly broad in our approach, and so we have sort of thought about almost everything. If it was me, and I'm not an investor, there are investors in this room, I'm a bureaucrat, and if I was an investor, I'd probably have lost all my money by now. But I think that there is stuff around green growth that gets me very excited. We know that India has 90% of its infrastructure still to build. If that infrastructure is done in the way that the first 10% was done, then the planet will not meet the targets in terms of climate change. So the niche is the people who are in the sort of green concrete world or in those kind of low carbon infrastructure pieces. There are lots of interesting innovators. We're quite excited that Earthshot is going to be going to Mumbai in November with His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, and they'll be talking about some of those sort of opportunities within India for those sort of small niche environmental inputs. Not a very radical answer, I'm sorry, James, but something in that green growth space has got to be the right place.
Fine. Okay, we're going to take a couple of, with too many questions, we're going to take a couple very short questions, please. No long speeches.
No long speeches. Thank you so much. And hello again, I'm Harleen Grover from Homerton at Cambridge. Firstly, thank you for coming to speak with us. Super appreciate that. I'm very curious to understand your thinking from your perspective in India as a founder of a health tech startup, what you feel are challenges coming from Cambridge or anywhere could potentially be in terms of taking our idea and working with India.
Okay, don't answer that. We'll rather do answer it, but just in a second.
It's fine, I think I'm loud enough.
Okay.
So hi, my name is Dia Singh. I'm a student at the London School of Economics. So I'm an Indian student in the UK, and I'm working a lot on Commonwealth migration, student migration to the UK. And in order to address illegal migration, we've seen unintended consequences on international students, whether that be Indian students or from anywhere in the world. And that's coming with a lot of public and political discourse around the graduate route visa. Considering that, how do you think that the UK can manage its political discourse with its need for innovation and growth? And how can Indian and international students essentially fit into that dynamic?
Okay, and I saw the third question here. Gentleman in the glasses, sorry to everybody else, we've only got time for a few. I saw many hands. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just going back to the FTA, you spoke about India and UK, the FTA is really great. But just playing devil's advocate, I don't want to sound negative. Protectionism is a key word since Liberation Day a few months back last year. India has been protectionist for the longest period. UK has been an advocate for open trade for a really long time. Both have had adverse reactions thanks to the tariffs from the US. The UK, especially players in the industry, are asking for protectionist measures.
Can I have a question? Question.
Yeah, question. So what's the middle ground? India wants a bit more free trade with nations around the world. UK wants protectionist measures. And I've seen reports coming, especially in terms of steel, that is a sticking point when it comes to FTA. How do you resolve that? What's the middle ground?
Okay, right. Magisterial 3-minute final answer. Health tech, visas, and protectionism. Go.
I wish I'd mentioned health tech as one of the things that you should invest in. So any investors here, I agree. Health tech is one of the areas where I think there are real opportunities. Again, it's something, I think what happens, the UK is brilliant in innovation. India is brilliant at taking stuff to scale. Health tech's an obvious area where you could bring those two things together, use the Indian experience with going to scale and doing it. In the UK, we tend to grow companies. Judge Business School alumni know this. We take them up to this stage, and then we sell them to the Americans. Let's take them to this stage, work on with the Indians, take it to that stage, and then we can sell it to the Americans. But we'll get a lot more. On migration, I mean, I think a little bit, sorry, where's my, yeah. I think, interestingly, the student numbers from India have held up okay, despite the changes a couple of years ago, which did make a bit of a dip in terms of postgraduate visas. That was about a change in the regime, which I think was for well-rehearsed reasons. We are exactly trying to make sure we hit that right balance that you mentioned. That's the balance that I was alluding to before. In terms of the discourse in the UK, I think migration is a very important part of the UK political discourse, and rightly so. I think we've got to get it right. If we get it wrong, it's worse for this country. We've got to get it right. We've got to get the discourse right. That means getting the balance right, and it means getting more of the right kind of immigration, less of the wrong kind of immigration. Protectionism. You're right. I mean, the UK is never going to want to be protectionist. That's not in our DNA. As I said, we're the wrong kind of country for protectionist approaches. We will take protection where it is necessary to protect UK national interest. And we have said that, and you see it at the moment. You mentioned steel. That's something we're doing in steel. You see it in the railways when we renationalise railways. We will always, I go back to my previous answer, the UK government will always act in the best interest of the UK people, in the same way that every government in the world does that. And sometimes you could put a label on that and call it protectionism, but actually it's about acting in your own best interest. But our DNA is as free traders.
Deputy High Commissioner, thank you. I hope that any of the students with their cell phones who send this back either to MEA or the Foreign Office, if they do that, they'll discover an excellent account of the UK-India relationship. And I'd ask you to give the Deputy High Commissioner a round of applause.
Thank you very, very much, Ben. It was not intended to turn it into a rapid fire. Thank you for taking it. If I may also, not to take the spotlight away from you, but thank you, James. James has been rather humble with his introduction. James is a geopolitical analyst and an author. His book, The Billionaire Raj, was the Amazon best-selling book of the year. Thank you very much for hosting the chat. Back to you, Ben. Thank you very much for re-emphasizing the importance of building trust. I believe the theme will stay with all of us far ahead than the day. If I may so request Suyash and Ketan to felicitate Ben.
We're going up, okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That is cool, because the packaging was...
Thank you very much, James, for your contribution.
Thank you.
I should come down here.
Yeah.
There we go.
You're tall.